Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. I'm just lifting this euphorbia because it's rather swamping the plants around it. Staking at this stage of the year, when the whole garden is growing in front of your eyes and plants are opening by the hour, practically, is not so much an exercise in control, but in support. Just get in there and underpin and let things flow and look as natural as possible. You want to celebrate what it's doing rather than instruct it to behave properly. Now, in tonight's programme, a little bit of instruction, but lots of celebration. Now, this week, Carol is celebrating blossom. This year, it's been a little late, but it has been fantastic.
Whether it's our sloe in the hedgerows or these glorious ornamental doubles, it really doesn't matter. It's their blossom which brings a whole season to life.
And we visit a couple in Yorkshire who share their love of begonias with every single person that passes by their house.
It's really embarrassing.
Yes.
You'll be out in the front of the garden there doing a bit of deadheading, and this bus will slow down to a crawl, and there's like 30 people with the cameras at the window taking pictures as you go past.
Later on in the programme, I'm going to be planting out my tomatoes, and I'm going to put them into different containers as an experiment. And at the end of the year, I'll see which has been the most successful. But first, I've got a job to do here in the Jewel Garden. Now, last year, I bought this pot. And I got it, to be honest, because it was such a cheap price, I couldn't resist it. And I bought it sight unseen. And when it arrived, it was slightly daunting because this is a huge, big pot. And planting it up is not just a question of putting any old thing in it. You have to think it through. Now, it doesn't matter what you plant, you do need to give it some drainage. And you can buy chocks that you simply place the pot onto. It's all right, Nige. And you do that so that it doesn't get waterlogged. So we just sit it up off the ground. I like to add terracotta crocks too. Now, I use terracotta because that's what we've got, but you could use anything. Polystyrene packaging chips work very well too. But apart from anything else, in a great big pot, it actually takes up some space. Otherwise, it gets really expensive putting in compost. When you're planting a big container of any kind, you will have a lot of plants and they will make quite heavy nutritional demands. So it's worth taking trouble with the compost. Now, you can use an ordinary potting compost, but after about a month to 6 weeks, you'll have to feed regularly. I like to mix my own. I use peat-free potting compost, sieved garden compost, leaf mould and grit in equal proportions. Now, you need drama in a big pot. And I plan a large container with 3 stories. You need a top story, you need a mid-level layer, and then a ground cover. And for the top story, for this container, I'm going to use a canna. Now, this is Canna Australia. It's got lovely chocolate plum-coloured leaves and then big, striking red flowers. Cannas come from Central and South America. They like heat and they like moisture. So if you plant a canna in a container, you are committed to watering it regularly. And also, it does need plenty of feed. Now, I'm going to plant that in the middle. Take it out the pot. There we go. Nice, healthy plant. It should flower up about eye level, which is perfect. Word of warning, cannas are very commonly being sold with a virus, and this streaks the leaves and loses them vigour. So look for a nice, clean foliage. So that's my top story, dead easy. The next story, the mid-level, is going to be dahlias. Now, dahlias, of course, come from the same region of the world as cannas, that's Central and South America, and they like the same sort of conditions. Now, this is called grenadier, and I've chosen it because the foliage and the stems pick up on the canna's foliage. It doesn't turn much darker than that, but there's this slight plum chocolatey colour to the stems, and also it's got a fabulous red flower, pure red. Got the tuber in there, and this I've overwintered, grew last year, and I'm going to put 3 in. Just pop that in like that. OK, that's my mid-story. And of course, at the moment, they're just as big as the cannas, but the cannas will soon overtake them. Now, underneath, I want to use annuals, and I've got a number of different ones here. I've got a couple of petunias, black velvet, and a Safina Bungady. Can't say it.
Of course, what I'm struggling to say is burgundy.
I want the really rich darkness. In fact, black velvet has also got a flash of yellow. And of course, petunias and annual, they will like moisture, which is just as well as it's starting to rain. And we'll use the two colours. And I will put these all the way around. And of course, they will grow and spill out to a certain extent. These are plants that I bought in March when they were tiny little plugs, potted them on, and they've grown really well. So it's given me a large plant for the price of a very small one. Now, I'm also going to introduce a flash of yellow. This is an osteospermum, voltage yellow, almost a gold. And perhaps it might pick up that flash of yellow on the petunia. And you can see it's grown decent roots. We've got a nice, strong plant. Now, I'll give that a good soak, and it will settle, and it will take a few weeks to get going. But then, as soon as the nights get warmer, the cannas and the dahlias will really start to grow. So we'll have these wonderful big canna flowers in the top story, the grenadier dahlias round about this level and underneath the bedding. And that will go on right into autumn. Now, I love mixing up all these different types of plants, but you can achieve really good effects just using bedding. And we visited a couple in Yorkshire who don't just love bedding, they're obsessed by it. And they share their magnificent obsession with every passerby.
We get an awful lot of holiday traffic, people travelling from West Yorkshire up to the Lake District. We get people tooting their horns, people stopping, taking pictures, knocking on the door. We've become a bit of a tourist attraction in our own right, really. It's really embarrassing. You'll be out in the front of the garden there doing a bit of deadheading, and this bus will slow down to a crawl, and there's like 30 people with the cameras at the window sort of taking a picture as you go past.
We started 27 years ago, putting the flowers out.
It grew and it grew and it grew.
Yeah.
And every year it's still growing. This village is not called Coniston Cold for nothing. It is cold, as you can gather, and we get a lot of wind and very cold weather. So we had to find a plant that would withstand our climate, and we ended up with the begonia.
I would always recommend begonias. You can let them dry out, you can overwater them. They will always grow, no matter what. And in this climate here, that's been proven time and time again. We get plug plants, very small plug plants, which need potting on. So that'll start in February, March time and run right through till May, when we start planting. Well, it's late May before we can plant out here. But we can get frosts well into June here. But it takes about 3 weeks to put them all out. One year I worked out, by counting the plant pots, I grew 6,500, which a bit frightening. It used to take me approximately 2 hours a day to water them by hand. Sometimes in midsummer when it was hot, you'd do 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours at night, which is a lot of time. Whereas now it's all done by a computer that switches itself on and off, which is a lot better. Feeding, I will usually commence in an evening because you don't want direct sunlight. When I'm feeding the plants, I found that tomato feed mixed with seaweed extract is the best, without a doubt. But you've got to be careful with seaweed extract. You must stick to the dilution rates, If you don't, you'll kill the plants. It's very powerful stuff.
Well, personally, I can't see any room for expansion anywhere. I think we would basically have to hang them from the roof if we were to put any more flowers up. But I know that next year Robin will say, I've ordered a few too many flowers now, I've got some left, where shall we put them? And I'll say, there's nowhere, Robin. And then all of a sudden I'll hear him drilling the wall and he'll have found another place and there will be more flowers going up. But there's a will, there's a way.
There have been times when we've thought, you know, we can't carry on with this. It's too much of our life. It takes too much time. But it is the nice cards that we get sent.
People waving off the
just so
cars
lovely.
and off the coaches.
It makes you
know.
feel very humble as well.
Yeah, it makes you feel good.
Yeah,
Making
it's
the
a good
world
feeling.
a brighter place.
Yeah.
The pond is starting to get lush and mature, but it is only 12 months old. All this planting has been done in the last year, and one of the things that I'm keeping an eye on is quite subtle, which is a line of reflected light, exactly along the line where I am now, which is through the gap in the hedge. And I deliberately wanted this line to continue the path across the surface of the water. And of course you can do that with water. You can play with reflections and light. And the water mint, which I planted last year as one little clump, has now grown across that, and of course is spoiling the reflection. So I want to just thin it back a bit. Now is a really good time to divide any marginal plants, to plant any aquatic plants, because it's warmed up. In fact, it's quite a chilly wind today, but the water is much warmer than it was a month ago. And it's getting clearer too. I think perhaps the barley straw I put in about 4 or 5 weeks ago is beginning to work, although the whole balance of a pond is a subtle and shifting thing, and it's to do with light and shade and minerals. So one of the things you have to do is keep some of the water covered. You want to keep 1/3 of the surface of the water covered by plants. But this water mint, you can see, is spreading across here. Look at that. It's really minty. Now I'm going to divide that a little. It's as tough as old tough. And you can see the roots are there. So I haven't harmed what I've taken is I can move it to another place if I want, or I can compost it. And one of the things that I'm very aware of is if you want to really encourage newts and frogs and snails and dragonflies and all the lovely things that will come to a pond like this, you must have lots of cover for them. Let's put a little bit of this water mint down there. That will bed down in, and this can go to the compost. Over you go. This is tinkering. It's playing, really, in the water. Any kind of water lends itself to nice playing about. But it's important and it's timely because plants can very easily re-establish if you divide them, and if you plant new plants in, they will get going very fast in the water. But you may not have water. Nevertheless, here are some other jobs that you can be doing in your garden this weekend.
If you took cuttings in spring from plants like dahlias or delphiniums, check them over, and if you see new growth from leaves or roots, it's time to pot them on. Remove them carefully and pot up each cutting individually into fresh potting compost. Water them and put them in a protected place where they can grow on, so they should be ready to plant out in late summer. Late flowering clematis grow very fast at this time of year and can get in a real tangle. So, using soft twine so you don't damage the delicate new tendrils, unravel them and tie them in. And then when they do flower, they'll be exactly where you want them.
Come on, Squish Squash.
Mr. Saturday's dance. Would they crowded the floor? Couldn't bear it without you. Don't get around much anymore.
It's time to earth up potatoes. Draw the soil right up over the foliage. This will protect them from any late frost, but more importantly, mean that the tubers are well covered and thus protected from light, which turns them green and poisonous. There's a final benefit, because an extra layer of soil will also provide protection from blight spores that might occur later in summer.
The blossom on my step-over apples is a relief, actually, because the poor things have been moved. They were in with the soft fruit and then had to be moved to make room for the greenhouse, and now I've put them in here. And they seem to be adapting. And, of course, the great thing about step-over apples is not only do they look good, and you can have them as a decorative element in amongst vegetables, but also it does give you fruit in a very, very restricted space. But the blossom is as good on a little apple tree as the biggest one. It's the same flowers and hopefully the same fruit. And there's something about any blossom that just makes your heart sing. Well, I don't know if Carol's singing, but she's certainly celebrating blossom.
There are so many blossom trees that light up our gardens and hedgerows from spring to early summer. Their delicate clusters of flowers are a seasonal delight for us and for the wildlife. Sloe is the first sight of spring in our countryside. It's called Prunus spinosa because the whole thing is spiny, spiky. It's a very well-armed sort of a shrub. And those spines are poisonous, but they're there to protect those flowers and the fruit that follows them. The wood itself of sloe is extremely hard, and the Irish use it to make their shillelaghs. Not only do birds nest in its branches, but the whole thing is humming with activity. And after the flowers have fallen to the ground, there are the most wonderful small black fruit sloes. There's no avoiding sloe. It's in your face, it's instantly recognisable, it's there. But it's not until you stroll in the woods that you come across our wild cherry, Prunus avium. This too is packed with all sorts of nectar, and as the sun shines in here, wildlife come to visit. You can see immediately, though, when you look up into these branches, the similarity between this and all those ornamental cherries that grace our gardens and pack our city streets. It's hard to believe that the ornamental Japanese cherry tree, so popular now, only came to our gardens around 100 years ago. In Japan, sakura, cherry blossom, plays a hugely important role in daily life. The optimism and yet the ephemerality of these beautiful blooms opening wide represents life itself, followed by the inevitability of death as the petals fall to the floor and carpet the ground. The blossom, too, signifies clouds as tree after tree opens its snowy blooms and moves across the countryside. Here at Batsford Arboretum in Gloucestershire, they've got 130 different types of ornamental cherry trees. Many of them a familiar sight in British parks and gardens. And this is one of the finest examples. It's so blossomy. This is Prunus sargentii. Just look at the scale of this. It's huge, it's massive, it's a structural monument to the beauty of cherry blossom. Too big for a lot of gardens, but what a spectacle. And as if that wasn't enough, When the autumn comes, this is one of the first of all the cherries to change colour. Head gardener Matthew Hall's showing me the national collection of village cherries held here at Batsford. These trees come from villages in Japan and flower in succession right through the season.
We've got Yadoensis. This is what starts the flowering cherries. Everything goes on from here.
The whole thing travels up the country, doesn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Batsford has trees that are perfect for smaller gardens too. So dainty.
Yeah.
What a picture.
Absolutely perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So this is Prunus incisa.
Incisa, yeah, it's a Fuji cherry. It's an ideal cherry for the small garden.
Well, you can imagine that growing anywhere, can't
Yeah,
you?
you
know,
could.
even on a tiny, tiny plot.
That's it. You can grow it two different ways. You can have a straight upright stem, or you
Right.
can have maybe multiple stems coming up.
Right.
It's small leaf, really compact flowers. It's 2 to 3 metres and quite shrubby.
I've got that tiny one. What's it
Kojo
called?
no Mei.
Kojo no
That's
Mei.
it.
And
Yeah.
I've got a couple of them, but I grow them in pots.
That's right, good for pot culture.
So even if you haven't got a garden,
Yeah, that's
you
it.
can have a
that's
flowering
right.
cherry.
Yeah, that's right. That's the beauty of them.
Thanks to the introduction of these ornamental Japanese cherries, we really can choose from a wealth of blossom trees, as well as enjoying our own wild species. Whether it's our sloe in the hedgerows or our wild cherry, Prunus avium, whether it's the village cherries from Japan or these glorious ornamental doubles, it really doesn't matter. It's their blossom and brings a whole season to life.
I last went to Batsford 10 years ago and it was absolutely fantastic. I must go back next spring. This spring, one of the great delights has been the apple blossom, which of course has been very late, like all blossom. And because it's all come out together, there should be really good cross-pollination and, touch wood, a nice crop of apples. So to have apple blossom in late May is unusual, but it's been a real treat. Now it is time to plant out tomatoes. I've got a batch here of Gardener's Delight. One of my favourites. It's got a fairly small tomato, delicious raw, even better, I think, roasted. Absolutely perfect. And these I grew from seed, and you can see they've got a nice root system. They're not pot-bound. If I plant these out, they'll grow really strongly over the next month or so and then start to set fruit. Now, I've grown tomatoes, for at least the last 40 years, and I really had thought until last year I pretty much knew how to do it successfully every time. But then I paid a visit to Richard Sanford, who is a superb vegetable grower. All these tomatoes look really impressive, but this pair here are incredible. Those are the best tomatoes. These are the best tomatoes I have ever seen in the UK. Very kind of you. Now, Richard made me rethink everything about tomato growing because he grew those amazing tomatoes, and they were stunning, in terracotta pots, about this sort of size. And what was extraordinary was that the pots were certainly no more than half full of compost mix, so that they had a tiny root run, but he fed them every single day from homemade feeds. So the upshot is, this year I want to experiment. I want to try different ways of growing tomatoes. And I shall be growing some in the other greenhouse, but I'll also grow some in different containers in here. Now, I've got a grow bag here, so I will grow some in those. I've got some terracotta pots, I'll grow some in those, and I'll also grow some in what I normally use, which is a large plastic pot. So it's got a decent root run. And if they're all Gardener's Delight, I can just simply compare how they grow, and most importantly of all, what the fruit are like. Right, let's start with the grow bag. To be honest, I haven't used a grow bag for about 10 years, but I used to use them and they were perfectly successful. When you buy them, give them a really good shake because they're stacked on pallets and they get very compacted. So just make extra holes along the bottom so that can drain out. And then I would grow 3 tomatoes in a bag like that. Like that. And then you simply take a plant. Now, as a rule of thumb, I've always said that you should bury tomato plants at least up to the first leaf, and it wouldn't hurt going up as much as that, because then you get roots growing from the stem and you get a more secure plant, because this is going to get very big and heavy. However, in a grow bag, that's tricky, because what is astonishing is how shallow the bag is. It really doesn't feel as though there's enough depth of soil to support the plants. But we'll see. Okay, that goes in there. So. And that's in there. Exhibit A. Right, next I'm going to try Richard's technique, which is a terracotta pot with dangerously small amount of compost in it. Now that's really all he had. It seems absurd to me, but come on, let's try. Just one plant. And put that in. I am going to put a little bit more compost in there to bury it. Not to cheat, but just simply to anchor it in place. There we go. And I'll do a couple more of those. Put that in nice and deep. There we go. Exhibit B. And finally, the tried and tested large plastic pot. Now, I have deliberately been generous with my compost, left enough room to hold water on top, but that allows a fairly decent root run. And in the past, I would say not over-generous. But having seen Richard's example, it now looks enormous, but we'll see. And this I will bury, nice and deep. So that goes right down in there to bring the soil up round underneath that first leaf. Right, let's call that Exhibit C. And I will treat these as I always treat tomatoes. Richard's, I will remember his guiding principle, which wasn't prescriptive, but what it was pay great attention to their feed. And if need be, feed them every day. And the grow bag, I will just try and use my common sense and look after as best I can. And we'll see. If you grow tomatoes in a particular way, I'd love to hear from you. If you've got any secrets, share them. Now, we'll only know the proof of this come August and September. But we'll be back here before then. Till then, bye-bye. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Well, it's summer now, so having complained about spring for the last few months, we've got a chance to complain about summer. But it does mean that a lot of plants need moving on or else replacing. And I'll be looking at tulips and how best to deal with those today. And Carol is not complaining at all. She's celebrating fabulous rhododendrons in Dorset.
The whole place is packed full of rarities, brought here by generations of plant hunters.
And I shall be planting herbaceous perennials in my cottage garden and looking at how to spend your money most wisely on these fabulous plants, as well as tending to my sweet corn and carrots. Just snapping off the seed heads of these tulips. And I've never known tulips so late, but they are going over and they do need attending to. And I know that for a lot of people, that is a little bit of an issue. In fact, I've had a couple of letters, of which this is a good representative. It's from Nick Shearham. What does Monty do with his tulips after flowering? I'm about to tell you, Nick. I know about letting them die down and drying them before replanting, but they deteriorate and the flowers are inferior. Is it best to dispose of old bulbs and purchase new ones? Well, yes and no is the answer to that. Because tulips, when they die down, develop a new bulb. And if they produce one big enough, that will flower, but the chances are not as well as any of the tulips you've got, because what you bought were the absolute pick of the grower's bulbs. The bigger the bulb, the better they flower. And it can take a tulip 2, 3, or even 4 years to produce a big enough bulb to produce the kind of flower that you're used to. So if I left these in the pot here now, and these were rococo, fabulous, gorgeous parrot flowers, they would not flower so well next year. So if you're growing tulips in pots, always lift them, deal with the bulbs, and I'll show you how, and buy new bulbs for next year. So that answers that question. Now, how do you deal with them? Well, you take off the seed heads and then lift them out the pot. There we go. Here we are. You see, look, there's a nice example of a new one forming. Well, that's never going to be big enough to produce a flower for next year. But it's really important that the leaves and the stem naturally die back, because that's what's feeding the bulbs. Now, these ones are coming out easier. So what I'm going to do with these is to store them. I could throw them away on the basis that they won't flower very well for a year or two, and they've done a gorgeous display and it was worth their money. And that's a reasonable way to go about it. But actually what I try and do is store them and keep the best. And I can either store them and dry them and use them as dry bulbs, or I can actually line them out so that next year, if any produce flowers, I cut them and use them as cut flowers. And I've got some actually in the cottage garden. And that way you can develop your own stock, if you've got space and if you've got patience, because it may well take 3 or 4 years. But in the short term, I've got a place where I'm going to put them.
Store them somewhere dry with natural light. Wait till the leaves have completely died back. Then remove the stem, clean off any soil from the bulbs, and they can be planted in the autumn.
Well, that's the tulips put to bed. But Carol paid a visit to Dorset to frankly revel in one of the season's best displays. She's gone to the home of the Digby family that across the past 3 generations have built up a staggering collection of rhododendrons.
When you step into the gardens of Minton House, it's like entering a whole different world. It's almost as though you'd have woken up and found yourself walking along a track in the Himalayas. The whole place is packed full of rarities brought here by generations of plant hunters. These intrepid explorers risked life and limb. Men like Joseph Hooker and George Forrest travelled all over the Himalayas collecting plants, including many of the rhododendrons that now decorate this Dorset valley. The Digby family inherited this estate back in the 17th century, and each generation of obsessive plant collectors has left a legacy. The Honourable Henry Digby is keen to maintain the tradition.
My grandfather, great-grandfather and my father all sponsored many of the plant hunting trips to China.
Right.
And if you were a sponsor or a subscriber, then when the seed came back, it was given to the sponsoring gardens, and so we would receive the seed, propagate it in the greenhouses and plant it out in the garden.
Some of the rhododendrons brought here are now on the edge of extinction in the wild. These detailed drawings, a record of Joseph Hooker's 1847 expedition, show many of the plants that have found a haven in this garden.
They're very much technical books, although they're beautiful drawings, beautiful prints. That all the stamens, the seed pods and everything are meticulously copied or painted here. And here we are 160 years later or whatever, and you know, we are actually identifying them
from these
this
descriptions,
book,
from this
and
book.
from the technical book.
Head gardener Ray Abraham's task is to look after this unique collection of historic plants. This looks really special. What's this one?
This is Falconeri that came to this garden from the Hooker collection.
Right.
And he actually brought it over here to Minton Gardens. But the great thing about the plant collectors is they love to keep everything secret.
Yes.
And they didn't like divulging where they got it from, even in the Himalayas.
Right.
And very often they would shoot at each other in the Himalayas if they saw each other across the valley, because they didn't want anybody else to collect that plant.
This is just amazing, isn't it? It's an absolute wall of rhododendrons.
Yeah, they grow like this in the wild, and we've tried to replicate the way that they grow, so that they can protect each other, because they don't like the wind.
It obviously works, doesn't it? But,
well, that's right.
But, I mean, I understood Dorset was limestone. How do you grow acid-loving plants?
We have a soil that is special to this valley. This is a natural spring called Lady Abingdon's Well.
Right.
And this is the nature of the soil here, which is green sand. All the rhododendrons are grown on this green sand.
So what is green sand?
Well, green sand is a very, very acidic soil.
Yeah.
Through thousands and thousands of years of rotting matter, and the green sand becomes acidic, if you like, as in natural leaf mould. Because of the more acidic nature of it, the flowers produce brighter colours.
And what a dazzling array of colours. The towering pink of Griseanum King George, or the compact yellow of Wardeye, in brilliant contrast to the riot of purple Augustinii. But Ray's not content. He wants to hybridise these amazing plants to create even more new varieties.
The whole idea of this plant is to create it, turn it red in the future.
What, you want this in red?
Everything in red.
Right.
The bottom of the leaves and the flowers all in red.
How do you go about it?
Well, you take pollen from these anthers here, and then you transfer that to barbatum,
right,
the stigma on the barbatum flowers.
Yeah. He can hybridise using the pollen of the barbatum right now, or store the anthers for use later.
I can cut the anthers off,
Yeah.
so I can actually put that in the freezer and keep it for a year. Fantastic. So then I can transfer the pollen in a year's time to a plant that flowers at a different time of the year. And then create that hybrid.
So the possibilities are endless, aren't they?
They are.
How exciting. For Henry Digby, one of the joys of his collection is that he is able to preserve rare and endangered varieties for posterity and make his own mark on the garden.
I'm always thinking 3 generations ahead, which is actually extremely frustrating, because whatever you do, you're not going to see it in your own lifetime. But I take the view that I'm the beneficiary of what other people in my family have done in the past, so I can enjoy what they did now, and so hopefully the next 3 generations' time or whatever will enjoy what I create now.
And if you still have doubts about the true value of this garden, just look at this. The renowned plant hunter George Forrest discovered Rhododendron hippothoides high in the mountains of Sikkim. But now this is possibly one of only 2 or 3 specimens left in the entire world. It just shows you the importance of the work that Minton does, both in growing these beautiful rhododendrons to perfection, so we can see them as they are in their natural state, but perhaps even more importantly, making sure that there's material there so they can be propagated and brought back into cultivation.
I've got some perennials to put in the cottage garden. Now, the cottage garden is evolving, and I'm adding in the lovely medley, the random mix that comprises the heart of any cottage garden. So, for example, I've got white currants here next to a rose. We've got pinks growing in a very informal mix. So, I need to add the next layer. We've got shrubs in, and herbaceous perennials do that job brilliantly. And just to make it clear, a herbaceous perennial is a plant that dies right back over winter and then returns again the next year, sometimes for 10 or 20 years, sometimes a bit shorter lived and only for about 3 or 4. Now, herbaceous perennials are wonderful, and every garden should have as many as possible. The trouble is they can be quite pricey, particularly if you're buying a lot. But there are ways of spending your money wisely. The first thing to do is to look for small plants. This is a Campanula lactiflora Pritchard's variety. And it makes better economic sense to buy 3 of these and plant them in a group than to buy one that is 3 times as large. Because what you'll be paying for there, as much as anything else, is the nurseryman's time. They've got to water them, they've got to protect them, they've got to repot them, and that costs money. Whereas if you let the time happen in your garden, you get the benefit of the plant and you get it cheaper. So that's tip number 1. The second thing to do is to buy a large plant, as big as possible, and divide it and make yourself more plants from wine. You could make 3, 4, 5 clumps that by next year, each will be as big as this plant. So effectively in 1 year, it's cost you 1/5 of what it otherwise would. This is a Michaelmas daisy. Now, all you have to do is take it out, and you can see that's pretty pot bound. So that plant has been in that pot for too long, and sometimes a really big plant will be going quite cheaply because of that. They want to get rid of it. And we simply break that up, and you can use your fingers and thumbs and get in there like that. And don't worry about damaging the roots too much, because there's plenty of them, and it's inevitable anyway. There we go. Now that's 2 decent-sized plants. So immediately we've halved the cost of this aster. Now, if I wanted to, I could break them down into individual plants. Each of these will grow. And I've got, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plants just in that clump. And I could either plant them individually in the soil or pot them up and grow them on. Well, what I'm going to do is plant about 4 or 5 asters in here, which will stay separate this year, but by next year will have made one really big, dramatic clump. And that way, for the cost of a relatively small plant, which cost under £7, I've got something that will cost me £20, £30 to buy. Well, there we are. By breaking it up, I've got a really big clump that will establish itself this year and get better and better over the next few years. And that's the spirit of cottage gardening. It's about making the most of limited resources. Nothing flash, but lots of effect without spending a load of money. Now, you may not be planting herbaceous perennials, but here are some other things that you can be getting on with this weekend. As broad beans grow, they get top-heavy and blow over very easily or simply fall under their own weight. They don't have tendrils to support themselves by twining, but all you need to do is give them something to lean on. And the easiest way to do this is use canes or sticks and some string. Now is the perfect moment to lift and divide primroses. Dig up a good-sized clump and break it into as many parts as you wish. You can replant it in the same place and it will regrow and flower with renewed vigour. Or you can establish new sites. Remember that it's a woodland plant and likes dappled shade and moist soil. Some herbaceous perennials, like this Lysimachia ciliata firecracker, can grow very strongly and dominate a border. If you cut some of it back by about half, it lets light and air into the plants around them. It staggers the flowering season of the Lysimachia and also extends the pollinating season for insects.
Come on, Mike. Come on.
By far the most dramatic thing in the garden at the moment are these alliums. This is purple sensation. And in fact, we planted 100 bulbs here 15 years ago. So most of them are self-sown. And they do look completely, dramatically stunning here at the beginning of June. And what's surprising is that if you read any book, they'll say that alliums need really sharp drainage, blazing sun. Well, this is heavy Herefordshire clay. And although it's an open site, it hasn't been blazing. For whatever reason, they're happy. These are the sweet corn that I sowed a few weeks ago, and you can see that they've all germinated successfully and grown really well. But they have exhausted the goodness from this seed compost, and seed compost doesn't need to be rich and good. Its sole purpose is for the plant to establish. And sweet corn really needs rich soil, lots of sun and good drainage. And if you've got that in your garden, these could go straight out. I mean, if I take one out of its plug, you can see that it's got a nice root system. That's a perfectly good plant. It's starting to get a little bit root bound, so it needs moving on. But in this garden, where you've got heavy soil, the nights are still cold, and if it's cold and wet at the same time, sweet corn will hate that. They really, really need heat to thrive. So I'm going to pop them on, and then I'll plant them out. And I don't know when that will be. It could be another month. It could be in a couple of weeks' time. Now I've mixed up a really nutritious mix, which is bark-based potting compost, which I've bought, mixed up with sieved garden compost and some grit, and actually a little bit of leaf mould too. The grit gives it better drainage, but the critical thing is garden compost is not only giving it more nutrition, but also it's adding that bacterial, fungal relationship with the soil, which is so important. And just pop the plug in, fill around it, and shake it. Don't push and prod the plant in, because that will just damage the roots. That's absolutely fine like that. Now, although this is a very busy time of year, it's worth finding time to go and visit other gardens. You always come back with something that will improve your own garden.
London is packed full of gardens. Many of them are preserved for the very wealthy and locked away from prying eyes. Others are hidden gems set in amongst the community. And this is our chance to find out what's behind these high fences and these gates.
Park Square is one of the largest of the traditional garden squares opening all over the city. Kevin Powell is the head gardener here.
This is a treat.
Welcome to Park Square.
Yeah. This dates back to the Regency times, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
So how's that reflected in the design here?
The idea was to create the country in the urban setting as a respite to the hustle and bustle further down in Regent Street. Sort of planting design of the time was to have a lot of green with definitions, punctuation of the odd spire of colour.
I'm so glad you're opening it and you can get in here. I've driven past here a million times. I've driven pretty much all the way around it but never got in here.
But it's not just traditional spaces here in London that are throwing open their gates to the public. Garden Barge Square is a unique collection of gardens moored on the Thames.
This is great. Yeah, it's what a garden's all about, really. A sense of exploration, finding something new at every turn. And you're moving from one barge to the other. And look, some good evergreen planting. This is Geranium madurense. This is not a hardy plant at all. This is from the island of Madeira. And obviously it's got through the winter completely unscathed. It shows what a microclimate they have here.
These 7 barge gardens have been designed by architect Nick Lacey.
It's quite a challenge to make a garden on a boat, I can tell you.
Where did you start?
Well, this was the very first one that we did. It had been used for dredging, I think, so it had some silt in the bottom of it. And bit by bit, it began to create its own ecology, which was absolutely fascinating.
Things started
All sorts
growing.
of things started growing, very surprising things. I mean, the obvious things like buddleia, but some very unexpected things like irises started growing in this thing. And ducks started nesting in it, and it was a sort of lovely little sort of ecosystem of its own. So I decided to kind of formalise the thing by doing it in a rather more ordered way.
Your roses are already in flower here, and I live just up the road in Hackney, and mine aren't yet, so you're ahead of schedule.
Well, it is quite mild here. I think the river acts as a sort of great air conditioning unit in a way. You know, it protects us from some of the extremities of the weather.
This one's gorgeous.
Yes, so this is one of our orchard barges, as you can see, medlars, which have done incredibly well. They're very, very happy.
They really?
And very
Beautiful
productive
trees,
as
aren't
well.
they?
Yeah, we get a tremendous crop off these in the autumn.
Yeah.
And lots of lovely medlar jelly.
I'm just so impressed. It's a real garden here. It's got trees, it's got shrubs and perennials and edibles, everything you want here, really.
It's amazing how well things do, isn't it?
And down here, am I right that you've got some bees somewhere?
Indeed we do. Some bees which have turned out to be very, very happy here. They managed to deal with 2 big tides a day. They go up and down by 7 or 8 metres, 25 feet.
And they still find their way home.
Indeed they do.
On the other side of the river is the Lillington and Longmoor estate, an urban housing development built in the 60s with open spaces in mind. Jim Myers looks after the communal spaces.
Jim, this estate is known locally as the Hanging Gardens of Pimlico.
That's right.
But there's several gardens within this estate.
Here is the exotic garden. Then we got what are called the med beds with the Mediterranean-style plants in. There's a sensory garden which sort of deals with smells, feels. There's a sort of small woodland-style garden at the far end which is left to grow a bit wild. Yeah, there's a multitude of gardens beside all the gardens that people have in their balconies.
Yeah, then you've got the balconies and everybody overlooking it, people are gardening on their rooftop spaces and everything. It's fantastic.
Many of Lillington's residents are keen gardeners, including Sancha. She was attracted to the estate because of its gardens.
Wow, it's a little paradise in the sky, isn't it?
Yes, my little bit of paradise.
You're a bit of a plantaholic, I can tell.
Yes, yes.
And you've got an orchard at the back here as well, plenty of trees.
Yeah, and lots of soft fruit as well.
Feels like proper horticulture's going on here. It's not just mowing lawns and cutting a few trees back.
No, the gardeners work so hard and keep them looking great. And that was another attraction when I came here. That there obviously were gardeners all over the place.
There's a myriad of gardens to experience during this open garden square weekend, whether it's Lillington, barge gardens on the Thames, or traditional squares like Park Crescent.
I've lived in London all my life and I didn't know that some of these gardens even existed. It just reflects the diversity, not only of horticulture, but the communities that come together and get to know each other through gardening.
Now, moving from wonderful gardens that are only open occasionally to the everyday tasks of growing vegetables. And I've got some carrots growing here, and they've germinated and are growing up. But although I tried to sow them as thinly as possible, there are the odd clumps and they're a little bit thick, and I want to thin them. The reason why you thin carrots is so that the ones that are left behind are a decent size. If you have a mass growing together in a clump, they'll all be small. So if you want them to be a little bit bigger, you do need to give them a bit more room. The process is dead easy. You just sort through them, and you want to leave about a finger's width between them. So start pulling them up gently, and you can see the size of carrot I'm pulling out is absolutely minute. You can do this job at any stage, but like this, the earlier I do it, the sooner the ones left behind will grow. Now, this thinning process is not difficult, but it is fraught with one big problem, and that is that carrots have a wonderful carroty aroma. So even something as tiny as that, it's got the most delicious carroty smell. And as well as pleasing you, it's thrilling the carrot fly. Now, carrot fly can smell carrots, apparently, from as far away as half a mile. So they smell it and they come zooming in, and they know where to lay their eggs. They lay their eggs on the surface of the soil, right next to the carrot. They hatch, they go down, and then the grubs eat through the roots as they grow. And you end up with the familiar holes that go right through it. And carrot fly are a nuisance. So you want to deter them. There are two ways of doing this. One is to do as I've done, which is to grow a baffle. So I've put shallots in here simply to provide another scent. And alliums of all kinds are traditionally used: chives, onions, shallots, garlic, in amongst carrots to deter the carrot fly. The other thing you can do is to provide a barrier, because carrot fly only fly about 4 foot high. So if you have a barrier of some sort round the bed of carrots, that works to some extent. Finally, do your thinning at dusk, because the carrot fly are much less likely to fly at night. Put all that together and you shouldn't have too much trouble, but just be aware of it. If you can smell a carrot, so can a carrot fly. Now, this is only a little job, but it is worth keeping on top of this sort of thing. In fact, that is the key to good vegetable growing, is lots of attention to detail, but in small doses. You don't have to have great heroic tasks. 20 minutes here and there is usually enough, especially at this time of year. And of course, this time of year, we're starting to get harvests. It's starting to deliver as well as take our time and energy. Anyway, that's it for this week. See you next week here at Longmeadow. Till then, bye-bye. Come on, son. Good boy. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World and our lovely sunny Longmeadow. The great thing about these June days is that there is a sense of both being in the moment, it's certainly summer, but also that it's just stretching out endlessly ahead of us. This week, Carol is searching out the full range of geums in all their glory, both wild and cultivated.
It's all about floatiness, waftiness. They're incredibly pretty plants, and they're always seen at their best in association with other plants.
And we visit the home of Formula One Supremo Sir Frank Williams and the garden that his late wife created.
She was so talented. She loved gardening very much, a very creative person, and I take great pleasure when visitors say, wow.
And as the season begins to reveal and unfold its harvests, I'm making sure that my soft fruit is as good as it can be, and also that I accompany my tomatoes with the ideal herb. I planted these pots a couple of weeks ago, and they're growing nicely, and they'll go on growing strongly, given the nutrition in the compost, for another month or so. But at about 4 weeks' time, they'll start to flag, and that's when they'll need some feed. Now, you can buy feed, but it's dead easy to make your own. And the first thing you must do is gather your ingredients. Little lambs. We tend to think of nettles being horrible, stingy things that are a weed and a nuisance, and we wish we could get rid of them. But actually, they're really useful in a garden for two reasons. The first is that they attract butterflies, because caterpillar larvae feed off them. They attract predatory insects, so they're doing a lot of good for the balance of the garden. And also, they make a really good feed. And the feed is rich in nitrogen. So if you want things to grow with a little bit more strength, if they're ailing and they need a little bit of an extra push, then nettles will do the job for you. So we'll grasp it with a gloved hand and cut them off. If you do see any butterfly larvae on the nettles, obviously don't cut those and choose your supply from another clump.
Of course, if you haven't got nettles in your garden, you can still use them because you can cut them from roadside verges. You can't dig them up. But no one's going to stop or mind you cutting some. And nettles aren't the only weed that provides the raw material for a superb garden fertiliser. This is comfrey. Now, it's growing as a weed in this hedge, but I'm letting it stay here because it's one of the most useful feed plants you could ever have in your garden. Now, we'll just cut it down to the ground. Right, I have nettles and comfrey, and the process is exactly the same for both. All you do is simply put them in a container. Now, a bucket is fine. You can use a huge tank if you want, but what you must do is stuff it full of the plant material. And I'm going to cut this up a little bit. You don't have to separate the leaves from the stems, but just to make it a bit easier, get this like this. And you can see why I'm choosing to do the comfrey first, because you really have to get to grips with it. And put it in the bucket. And push it down nice and hard. Because the more you get in, the richer the mixture will be. Probably get a little bit more in there, but that's the right idea. And then just top it up with water. Cover the leaves with water, leave it to steep for about a month. And you'll have a rich feed, which is particularly good for tomatoes and other fruiting plants. Now that looks like an innocuous brew, but believe you me, it will change. It will develop an aroma that can really only be compared to the worst dog's breath you've ever smelt. It is disgusting. So put it somewhere well out of the way and leave it for at least a month. Now, it's exactly the same process for nettles, although, of course, you do have to be a little bit more careful. So gloves on. Downside is they sting you. The upside is they don't smell anything like as bad as comfrey. And just like comfrey, the more you can get in the container, the better. Go on. Right, I'll leave those there for the next month where they can brew, and then we'll come back to them and I'll show you how best to use them. Now, I've been gathering native plants to make a feed, but Carol has been on the hunt for native plants for different reasons.
Geums are members of the rose family, Rosaceae. In our islands, there are 2 species, and this is one of them. This is Geum urbanum, woodavens. Its colouring is subtle. Both leaves, calyx and the buds are all kissed with crimson. One of its country names is Herb Bennet, from Herba benedicta, because it's supposed to ward off evil spirits. Our other native geum, Geum rivali, frequents water meadows and the side of streams. Rivali means living by a stream. But it's a genus that's spread far and wide. These numerous species from all over the world have given rise to a breed of new cultivars and hybrids which really enrich our gardens at this time of the year. What's more, their numbers are on the increase. Yellows, oranges, pinks and reds. Geums raise the temperature in any border. I've come to see a gardener who's devoted her garden to them. She looks after an entire national collection in just 1/4 of an acre. This I can't wait to see.
It all started when I saw Princess Juliana on a sales table, and the brilliant orange just struck me as a wonderful addition to the garden.
It's magnetic, isn't it?
It is, and that sort of set me off, and every time I saw a geum for sale, I bought it.
There's so much colour and it's so incredibly pretty.
They're absolutely wonderful, yes. And
I'm in love with them already. But this is your vegetable patch.
It was all supposed to be vegetables, but the GMs took over, I'm afraid. The soil was wonderful because the man who'd lived here for years limed it every year, and he manured it and worked it. And I suppose that's why I grow them and love them so much, because they like my conditions.
The National Collection holds 3 of the most garden-worthy groups.
The Rivale, which have drooping flowers with the calyx sort of enclosing the petals, and then there are the alpine types, which come mainly from the Balkans, which have upright, single, bright orangey red.
So they just
flowers.
stare in your face and then look at you.
This year, because we had a really cold winter, this is my theory anyway, they've all flowered much, much better than usual.
Because they thought they were at home?
Yes, yes.
One species in particular is a real shining star.
Chiloense, which come from the island of Chiloe, just off the coast of Chile.
What a lovely name.
Where it rains all the time, apparently.
Right.
And so they like moisture, but they grow perfectly well in full sun. These are the ones that everybody thinks of as GMs, really, because they're such good garden plants.
The vivid colours in these flowers transport you to Chile. Sadly, I can't say the same for this English summer. It really is pouring, but do you know what? They look just as beautiful in the rain, don't they?
They do, they love it.
Rain or shine, Sue keeps a close eye on this wonderful collection.
As I've got over 100 different GMs in the garden, I keep records. And so it's nice to know how long they flower and when they flower. And normally, the Rivale types start first.
Yeah.
But last year, the longest was actually Rubin, which flowered for about 25 weeks.
So those brilliant red flowers for 25 weeks. So that's when you can really recommend, isn't it?
Yes, certainly.
So the species that these come from all over the world?
There are many species. I've put a green sticker on all the places where the species grow, go right from Alaska all the way across to the far side of Russia, down to South Africa.
On the Cape.
Here's the island of Chiloe.
That's Chiloe. GMs are in charge. These forms of GM chiloanths rise up from this sea of forget-me-nots. Here, the peachy orange of this totally tangerine is exactly the opposite of the blue of the forget-me-nots. And yet, they're the same tone. And that, instead of creating a contrast, a discord, actually makes the whole combination so beautifully subtle. Here, the searing red of GM redwings combines so beautifully in this kaleidoscope of colour. Look at them with this frenzy of aquilegias and these big purple spheres of the allium. It's true, isn't it, that a brilliant clash is worth 1,000 mediocre partnerships. What is it that makes GM such special garden plants? It's not about impact, about bowling you over, despite the fact that lots of them have really vivid coloured flowers. Because the flowers are small and they dance around on these slender stems, it's all about floatiness, waftiness. They're incredibly pretty plants, and they're always seen at their best in association with other plants. That's what makes Sue's National Collection not only incredibly instructive, but inspirational in terms of the way that you can actually use GMs in your own garden.
We use GM chiloense here in the jewel garden because the colours are so intense, and more importantly, really, he loves it. It's completely happy in our rich soil and flowers from April right through till autumn. In fact, I'm now inspired to get some more. Now, you can't pretend that gooseberries look as lovely as geums, but they do taste better. And my gooseberries are coming along fine, thank you. If you remember, I removed them from the site of where the new greenhouse is, and the poor things were potted up and they were transplanted in here. The good news is they're doing fine. Now, there are a number of things to look out for. First of all, to see that there's decent growth, which there is. You can see that. We've got some fruit. So the news is, by and large, good. But there are a few problems which any soft fruit is likely to suffer from at this time of year. If you look at this plant here, it's clearly troubled, and the leaves are writhing in upon themselves, and that's because of aphids. If you lift the leaves up, you can see that they are encrusted with little black aphids. Now, aphids at this time of year are looking for soft, sappy growth. If they hit upon a plant, it can look like a disaster. Now, I don't worry too much about this because the rest of the plants are completely healthy, but I know that there are predators in the garden, ladybirds, tits, they will come and feed off them. And also, you get this cycle with aphids. It looks terrible, and then they pass, and the plant will recover. The best thing you can do is to blast them off with water. It's very simple. Just get a hose pipe and a spray, and you just water it vigorously, knock them off onto the ground, and they won't come back on. Now, your last resort, and I would stress that it is the last resort, is to use soft soap. Now, you can get this from a garden centre, and you just make a dilute mix, and that will kill the aphids. The downside is that it can kill other insects as well, ones that are doing no harm and are beneficial. So much for gooseberries. Now let's look at the red currants. Now, the red currants are looking perfectly healthy, but they do have a slight problem, and this is also an aphid one. And you can see the leaves are blistered and puckered and looking a bit scary, actually, warty almost. And that is another aphid. And this is the blister aphid, and if I turn it over, can you see that in there are tiny little aphids, and without my glasses I can't see them individually, and they're eating away at the underside of the leaf, and the top side of the leaf is reacting to that. So the blister is not the problem, it's a symptom. And the aphid actually makes it look awful, but it's really not doing a lot of harm. These plants almost invariably get blister aphid, and it will last right through to the autumn, but it doesn't really affect the plant. It's not doing it much good, but in the scale of things, it's not something to worry about. But there is a problem that you should be worried about, and that's sawfly. Now, sawfly is a little fly that comes in and is drawn to gooseberries, red currants and white currants, not black currants. And it lays its eggs at the base of the plant. And then the eggs hatch and the larvae come out and they start eating the foliage. And they start at the bottom and work their way up the plant. And the problem is that you can often only notice it when they reach the top half, and they can totally defoliate a currant or a gooseberry in a matter of a week or so. The simplest thing to do at this stage of the year is simply to prune out the middle of the plant, remove this new growth so that you can see what's going on, and also there's more ventilation. And the one thing sawfly hate more than anything else is a good strong breeze blowing through it. They like enclosed, dark places. So we'll just do a bit of pruning. So get in and just take out all the new growth. Another side benefit of cutting out the middle is that it lets light in, and the light will help ripen the fruit. So everything benefits. Now, having been through the fruit and opened them out, next week I need to get the fruit cage up to protect the fruits from the birds as they ripen. But here are some jobs you can do this weekend. Although it's best to leave major hedge trimming for another few weeks to allow birds time to leave the nest, you'll be amazed at the difference a little judicious pruning of vertical surfaces makes, especially on entrances and exits. Just trim them so they're crisp, and it tightens up the whole garden. The nights are now warm enough to plant out courgettes with confidence. They'll grow just as easily in a container as the soil, as long as you enrich your growing medium with some garden compost. Don't be tempted to put too many into one pot. It's better to have one strong plant than 2 or 3 weaker ones. Give them a sunny position,
water them well, and they should harvest right through into late summer. Now is a good time to take cuttings from deciduous shrubs, like fuchsia or this Philadelphus. Choose a stem that has no flowers or buds on it. Then either pull off the side shoots, leaving a heel, or cut them off beneath a leaf node. Strip off the lower leaves and push the cuttings into a free-draining compost. Water them and put them into a sheltered place, and then they'll be ready to pot on when you see signs of new growth.
As important as any job you can do in the garden is just to give yourself time to stop and soak up the treasures of this time of year. And there's one particular colour combination which really only works for about a week, 10 days at the most, right in the middle of June, is the Iris sibirica with the oriental poppies. And there's something in its freshness and its vibrancy that you don't get in the softer colours of spring, and nor in the richer colours of high summer. It belongs to the moment, and it's worth giving that moment all of your attention. Sir Frank Williams, founder of Williams Formula One, is opening his garden in memory of his wife, Virginia, who died earlier this year after a long battle with cancer.
She loved gardening very much, a very creative person. She saw a lot of opportunity and scope, and she did herself and certainly this family and this property proud, I think. And I take great pleasure when visitors say, wow.
My name is Mark Lyons. Lady Williams and myself designed all the garden together. We'd fire off each other. I'd come up with a suggestion, which she would then multiply by 100, which then I would multiply by 100, and it just snowballed and snowballed and snowballed.
She felt she could rely on Mark to understand and carry out what she wanted.
The remit I was given by Lady Williams when I came here was to put a modern garden into an old setting. She was always about surprises and breaking rules. If you said to her, don't do something, she would do the complete opposite. If she was told she couldn't do it, she would do it. As an example, she wouldn't want you to come through the walled garden door and see formal annual bedding. She wanted it to be completely different. It looks wild as you look at it, but it is all controlled. We've got things like the geraniums here in the white section, playing off with the hesperus. Just a touch of something like the anthryscus, the raven's wing, just to give it, so it's not block colours. The shock on people's faces when they actually come around the garden and they walk through the walled garden and expect manicured lawns, nicely kept edges, nicely kept borders, and actually what you get is this sort of wild flower jungle, which is, I think, is perfect. A really good friend of ours, Julie Cole, who lives on the estate, she's an excellent gardener. She had a very similar design in her conifer at home. I took Lady Williams down to see it. We both fell in love with it. We got Julie to draw the design for us, and then the problem we had was getting the design from the paper onto the hedge. We tried everything. We tried garden paint, we tried canes with string. Nothing would work. It just wouldn't stick on there. So in the end, we used shaving foam, which was the only thing that would glue to the actual leaf. And then we just used things like dustbin lids or big lids, stuck it round onto the hedge and just cut around closely into it. As you can see, you have to be very, very careful because if you cut into the old wood, the conifer will die. Any false move and you could kill it. Well, these living willow structures we made first by just cutting hazel from the woods, making the shape itself, and then planting the willow on each hazel strip. And then over time, these hazel strips have now disintegrated and just left us with this living arch. And as a legacy to Lady Williams, one of the many legacies that we're continuing in the garden, we've just planted wisteria either side of these arches. So eventually, in 5, 6, 7 years' time, this will just be one mass of colour in spring.
We should put so much into it, it'd be very, very wrong in every sense, just so we can let it tumble back to where it was. When I see all this green and the trees, it is pure England, I'm really proud of it.
It's so important for the garden to open for the NGS. It's so important to raise money for charities, especially cancer-related charities due to Lady Williams' death, but also because I really feel it's important to show off what we've done for Lady Williams' sake.
I like to lead a private life and not brag about success and all that sort of thing, but I do recognise that to many, many people who can't afford such a large property, so much land and so on, for them to walk around, etc., I know it gives them a lot of pleasure. They come as often as they want for that reason. She was so talented. And whilst flowers and stuff like that are a bit lost on me, everyone says, she did a splendid job and she was devoted to it. I'll miss her very much.
She was the heartbeat of the estate, there's no denying it, and sorely missed, sorely missed. She said to a friend of hers that she'd come back as a butterfly, and I've never seen so many butterflies in the garden this summer.
I think what every gardener knows, and what Lady Williams' garden shows so well, is there is a permanence in gardens that transcends life and death and the change of seasons. And that actually, I think, is a really important reason why we love gardening so much. Phew, it's hot in here. I'm planting basil. I don't think any other herb goes so well with tomatoes as basil. In fact, arguably, no two combination of tastes quite marry so exactly. The basil cuts through the acidity of the tomato, and you get that lovely richness of taste. And they share the same growing conditions. If you're growing tomatoes right, you'll grow basil right, and vice versa. So they make great companions. And it's worth remembering that basil is not a Mediterranean herb. It comes from tropical Asia. So it likes heat, and it likes a certain amount of moisture too. It doesn't like to be sodden, and the hotter it is, the more water it can take. But if you're watering your tomatoes right, you can guarantee you'll water your basil right. I'm spacing these about 9 inches apart, and that's because basil needs generous space. It's actually quite a large plant. It can grow 2, even 3 foot tall, almost a sub-shrub. And yet I know that most people buy basil in a pot from a supermarket, and you've got this little canopy of leaves, but there might be 10, 15 plants in a pot the size of this one. And you get the wrong idea of what the plant wants to do. It's a generous plant. It wants to grow strongly and vigorously, especially if given enough heat. So if you can sow it yourself, and it's not too late to sow some now and you'll be planting it out in about 4 weeks' time, then you get a whole new level of plant. And really importantly, it tastes so much better. Because if it's got the right nutrition and the right amount of water, you get lovely tender leaves that have beautiful, pungent, aromatic oils. If you don't have a greenhouse, they'll grow perfectly well on a hot windowsill. And of course, lots of people do have a pot of basil on the kitchen windowsill, and they're very happy with it. There are lots of different types of basil, and people have their preferences, but just for using with tomato or to make pesto, you can't beat straight green sweet basil. The sun comes out and it's summer. And we complain like mad about the weather, but it's what we've got.
And at this time of year, it doesn't really matter what the weather's like. The garden's so full of riches. And this is the moment. And if you don't just take it in and relish it and celebrate it for what it is, better or worse, then it's lost and it's wasted. And it's something actually I'm teaching myself more and more, is just to enjoy what is in front of you. And at this time of year, there's so much. Good boy. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. And welcome to the longest day in the year, June the 21st. And I always think of it not as a mountain with a peak which then drops down the other side, but as a plateau. We reach this point of summer, and for the next few weeks, the days are just flooded with lovely light. And of course, the thing to do is to make the most of them, both in ourselves and also how we manage the garden, just as a celebration of summer. Now, in tonight's programme, I'll be planting up fuchsias.
Carol will be looking at an understated woodland plant that will happily flower all summer long, given the right conditions.
Since its introduction centuries ago, the astrantia has become a real cottage garden favourite. It has wonderful stories to tell and an intriguing history.
And Joe's getting a preview of a superb Japanese garden.
The Japanese garden never really ends. It's about continually moving through the space and seeing different compositions as you go.
I shall also be planting out the sweet corn that I sowed some weeks ago and putting tender annuals into my writing garden. I've had tulips and wallflowers in these big pots over winter, and last year we had a big display of dahlias and cannas, but I've sort of repeated that in the other big pots in the dual garden, and this year I thought I'd try something completely different. And I'm basing it around fuchsias. You see, I've got this fabulous standard here, and it's funny how fuchsias are really popular. Lots of people grow them, lots of people love them, but they're not trendy. People slightly look down on them, I think, which is bonkers, because they're really wonderful plants. And I remember when I was a child, my aunt had a fuchsia by her front door. And when I was very little, I must have been about 4 or 5, we would go in and pinch off the flowers and take off the green end and suck the nectar out. And you could just get this hint, this ghost of honey. And it was the most intoxicating thing. And I remember being found by my aunt with a litter of her fuchsia flowers around me, looking rather guilty. And of course she was furious that I'd destroyed her lovely plant. So that was my introduction to fuchsias. And I want to get their richness and the intensity of colour, because of course here in the dual garden, that's what I'm looking for. And I think they'll make a dramatic display. This is Mrs. Popple, and it's a standard. Now, a standard means that it's got a bare stem and what will eventually become a round ball of flower at the top. This one's only a year old and not terribly expensive. This was about £25, which I think in the scheme of things is a lot of flower for your money, and it will go on producing these relatively small flowers with rich purpley interior, crimson cherry colour on the outside from now right through into autumn. So I think good value for money. Now, as far as growing it, what we need to do is make sure it's got a nice, loose, well-drained soil. Fuchsias are woodland plants, and they like dappled shade. So my main problem here is, will it have too much sun? I think it will be all right, but I need to watch for that. And the soil mix I put in there is a bark-based compost with quite a lot of leaf mould added. If you buy a proprietary compost
add at least some perlite or grit. And if you've got some leaf mould, that's ideal because it will make it nice and loose and a good root run. Now, if I put that in a little bit, about like that, there, and I'll top up around that. Really important to have a stake. I think I'm probably going to replace this stake with a longer one that will go right down into this big pot because that's very sensitive to wind rock and you can get damage. So that definitely isn't going to be strong enough. But fundamentally, that's the easy bit. They don't need a lot of feed. They don't like to be waterlogged. Water them every day if need be, but don't soak them. The water must drain away and they like rain. In fact, this one, Mrs. Popple, is pretty hardy. This is tough. But if you're growing a standard, the stem is very, very susceptible to frost damage. So this will have to be brought into a greenhouse in November. That's my centrepiece. Now I'm going to underplant this with more fuchsias because if you're going to grow fuchsias, don't do it apologetically. Go for it, revel in it. And you get this lovely full-on blast of colour. Now this is one called Dark Eyes. And this has got double flowers, whereas Mrs. Popple is single. And it's got a kind of violetish touch to its mauve and purple, which contrasts with the red. I'm going to put 4 in here. Now, these will grow to be 3-4 times their size. You can see that they've got lots of nice, healthy growth. When they finish flowering, which will be around about the time of the first frosts, I like to take even the hardy ones in. But if you take your fuchsias indoors, they don't have to have any special treatment. You can put them in a shed, in a cellar. We put ours in the greenhouse underneath the bench. And they're quite happy over winter, as long as the temperature doesn't go much below about -5. But a frost-free greenhouse is absolutely ideal. I'm filling the gaps with some vinca. This is vinca minor, and it's a lovely purpley violet colour that we had in the spring garden, and last year took lots of cuttings from. Just tiny little cuttings from the end, and I've got about 50 of them, which I was going to put under the hedges. But I think this will be nice trailing down over the side of the pot. And of course, the colour will pick up the colour of the fuchsia. Bit of an experiment. I've never thought of growing this in a pot before, but we'll see how it looks. Now, this is a big set piece. But Carol's looking at a plant that is much more modest in many ways, but really rich, both in the way it appears and also in its history.
As summer finally takes over, there's a great verdant swell all around the garden. There's not a patch of soil to be seen. Everything is beautiful coppers and verdant greens. And the whole thing forms a backdrop for all manner of flowering plants. One of them, the astrantia, since its introduction centuries ago, has become a real cottage garden favourite. It has wonderful stories to tell and an intriguing history. This floral beauty is Astrantia major. It's found all across Central Europe, growing in damp meadows alongside other perennials. It was first recorded growing at the end of the 16th century in the garden in Holborn of one John Gerard. He was a herbalist, a botanist, but above all, a good gardener. He'd gather plants from far and wide and grow them there. He recorded all these wonderful plants in a book that's come to be known as Gerard's Herbal. To the large and singular furniture of this noble island, I have added from foreign places all the variety of herbs and flowers that I might anyway obtain. I've laboured with the soil to make it fit for plants, and with the plants that they might delight in the soil, that so they might live and prosper under our climate, as in their native and proper country. Though Gerard's words were written centuries ago, his philosophy still rings true. It informs what we all do in our gardens. It's certainly what I try to do. I love astrantias, and they love living in this garden. The soil suits them perfectly. It's rich and deep and fertile, and it's heavy clay underneath. Every winter they get a special treat when we lay a great big deep layer of muck all across these beds. I like to try and grow them in the sort of context where you find them in the wild, sheet by jowl with other perennials and grasses. First of all, they're out with all these late spring flowering plants. Things like the rheum here, that lovely lamium. But then they're around when the poppies pop and the peonies burst forward. All the plants in these beds and borders, including the astrantias, seem to form clumps. And sometimes it's lovely to contrast them with something with big foliage, a statuesque plant like this Rogersia. Its bronze leaves are touched with pink too, which picks up on the astrantia aroma that runs through the centre of it. And the whole thing is set off by the glaring white of this Geranium sylvaticum. This association, like so many in my garden, are inspired by Marjorie Fish, the doyenne of cottage gardening. She loved astrantias of every description. In some ways, she reminds me of John Gerard. They both collected plants from all over the place, far and yonder. Astrantia shaggy. Isn't it aptly named? With these sort of long bracts and this rather untidy kind of flower. It has a real wild, rascally look about it. Marjorie Fish must have pounced on this plant. It's exactly the sort of thing that she loved, and it would have fitted in wonderfully with her wild sort of plantings. People have called Astrantia shaggy Astrantia Marjorie Fish, a fitting tribute to a great plantswoman with a real eye for a plant. Astrantias belong to the family Apiaceae, which used to be known as umbelliferae. Now, umbels are familiar plants. Usually it's cow parsley that we see on country walks, growing in the verges and ditches and lining the roads, with their flat heads of small flowers. Whereas in astrantias, it's a hemisphere, a dome. Once the flowers are pollinated, seed is set. Eventually it becomes brown and drops down onto these bracts. And then one day in late summer, on a really blustery day, the wind carries them off and they then become next year's seedlings. Well, that's how nature does it. But if we want to, we can step in and play a part in the process ourselves. Growing astrantias from seed is so rewarding. You fill the seed trays, but then you slide them underneath the mother plant and you wait for nature to take its course. The cold and the weather eventually persuades the seed to germinate. In the spring, you've got a tray full, hopefully, of little seedlings which you can prick out and pot on. All these astrantias here were grown from just one collection of seed. John Gerard, Marjorie Fish and countless other gardeners have celebrated astrantias. They're such easy, accommodating plants that bring beauty to all our gardens for months on end.
Astrantia is actually one of my favourite plants too. It's a lovely, lovely plant. And I'm going to put one here in the writing garden. And I've got one called White Giant, a fairly new variety, which has got a perfect combination of silvery white and touches of green. Exactly fits the theme that I'm trying to build up in this new garden. Now, when you're planting Astrantia, just remember it's a woodland plant. It likes light shade and, above all, does not like very dry soil. It needs moist soil. The only point that I would reiterate that Carol made is that they do drop their seeds, and they seed themselves everywhere, fairly locally to the plant, but they certainly will increase, and the root of the parent plant does get pretty woody and quite hard to divide. So if you want to constrain it in any way, remove the seedlings as they appear. But that's beautiful. I don't want to constrain that. I want that to spread right through this garden. An Astrantia is an herbaceous perennial. It'll die back in winter and then regrow the following spring and go on doing so for a number of years. But obviously annuals do all their growing, all their flowering, all their seeding in just one short season. And I've got two annuals here which really show the difference between the seasonal variations of light. And of course, today of all days is the balancing point of the light of the year. So I've got Ammi majus, wonderful umbellifer plant, which is growing. It's flopping all over the place around here. And I've also got Cosmos bipinnatus purity. Now, Ammi majus is what we call a long day plant. It comes from the northern hemisphere, and it responds to light. As the days get longer, it grows more and more vigorously and is more and more inclined to produce flower. As they get shorter, that urgency increases and also to set seed, because it knows its time is up. It knows it's got to do everything it can to reproduce before the dying of the light. Whereas the cosmos, which comes from closer to the equator, and that includes plants like zinnias, sunflowers, even tubers like dahlias, don't respond to light because the light remains pretty constant around the equator. It responds to heat. And by coincidence, the heat tends to increase round about the time of the longest day. So it's a brilliant time for planting out tender annuals. Put them out now, they'll grow well because it's warmer, particularly the nights, and they'll go on growing and flowering right through till the cold weather. Quite a few more to get in the ground. But if you're not planning to plant any annuals this weekend, long day or short day, here are some other things that you can be getting on with.
Strawberries are now starting to turn from green to red. And it's infuriating when the birds get at them before they're ready to harvest. So a net put up now will protect them. Make sure that it's stretched taut so birds can't get tangled in it, and also make sure it's fixed securely to the ground because they will slip underneath it if they possibly can. It's important to support your tomatoes before they need it. You can either put a cane in and then tie the plant as it grows, or attach a string to the base of the plant and then tie it off either to the roof of the greenhouse or to a wire strung out across it. And then as the plant grows, you simply twist it around this string. To keep box hedging and topiary looking at its best, it needs cutting now. Either use a lightweight electrical trimmer or else really sharp shears. And in either case, the secret is to keep moving. Just cut lightly in as flowing an action as possible. And then when you gather up the trimmings, they can be put onto the compost heap.
Of course, nobody is better or more meticulous at pruning and trimming trees and shrubs than the Japanese. For them, it is a highly developed art form. And a few weeks ago, Joe went to visit one of the very first Japanese gardens that were ever made in this country.
You'd expect to find a beautiful garden in the heart of rural Hertfordshire, but what you might not expect to see is a garden like this, a traditional Japanese garden. The maples are just coming into leaf, beautiful purple maple here, creating a lovely dappled shade beneath. And look at these beautiful sculptural ancient pines that were planted back in the 1920s. Now, I feel as if I'm in Kyoto. I've always wanted to go to Japan to see the gardens. I don't really have to.
There's a whole philosophy behind a Japanese garden like this. The idea is to bring together the most beautiful plants and conjure up scenes so tempting that they'll bring down the gods from heaven.
One of the elements that it has to contain is a bridge. Now, this one is based on the sacred bridge in Nippon. And there are 3 wonderful red lacquered bridges through this garden, really singing out against the green backdrop. But it's more than that. It's about the journey and the way you cross the water. And a Japanese garden never really ends. It's about continually moving through the space and seeing different compositions as you go. So how did this piece of Japanese paradise get here?
This garden was created in 1905 by wealthy China merchant Herbert Good after a visit to the country. To make his garden truly authentic, he brought back 20 Japanese workers and a garden designer. These spaces are notoriously high maintenance. They need to be polished, pruned and brushed, and that's the job of Karen Lawton.
How do you approach planting a garden like this?
There's 4 seasons, there's 4 sections to a Japanese garden. And the first one is the spring planting, which are very much to do with the cherries. Then there's the wisteria, and that's the summer. Then during the autumn time we have the aces, beautiful reds and oranges. And then during the winter time we have the structure, and hopefully if we have a huge fall of snow, it just looks an absolute picture.
I can imagine. I think that's so interesting that each season is just depicted by a single plant almost.
Yes, yes.
And then the structure is so important in a garden like
Yes.
this. Quantities.
Quantities, it's always odd numbers, 3s, 5s, 7s.
Yeah.
That is a sign of prosperity. Everything is all about getting the best out of the garden.
You couldn't have a Japanese garden without a beautiful cherry blossom.
Absolutely not.
It's a culturally significant plant, isn't it?
Absolutely. During the Second World War, the Japanese kamikaze pilots would fill their cockpits full of Japanese cherry blossom and then open their windows and all the blossom would just pour out of the cockpit.
Yeah, just before they plummeted
Yes,
down.
yes.
Wow, I didn't know that. So this is the authentic tea house?
It was imported in 1923.
Oh, wow.
Piece by piece.
You can sort of sit here when it's raining outside,
Yeah.
you're somewhere covered in the garden
Gorgeous.
to look out
Yeah,
into
yeah.
the beautiful landscape here.
Yeah.
It's an amazing vision to realise it was going to mature like this. I mean, I guess when the plants first went in, it can't have looked like very much, really.
Not at all. I've got a picture here. It's an old newspaper cutting in 1939 of the garden when it was 10 years old. And everything is really, really tiny.
You know, the bridges and the buildings look so
Yes.
big in comparison to the plants. It
Yes.
almost looks like they're almost bonsai, the
Yes,
plants.
yeah.
Yeah.
100 years on and we've got what we've got now.
And then this natural piece of land, was there already undulations and this sort of topography here before the garden was built?
No, it was a field originally, and they dug out the 3 ponds by hand and put it over into a huge mound over there, which they now call Fuji Mountain.
So this is it then?
Yes, it is.
The
Mount
crowning
Fuji.
glory.
Yeah. You're supposed to light a fire to create the eruption of the volcano.
Of the volcano?
Which is supposed to come out of here in smoke.
Right, really?
Yes.
Does it still work?
Yes.
You can imagine back in the Edwardian days how amazing that would be, wouldn't it? I mean,
yeah.
it's an authentic Japanese garden, but they obviously
Yeah.
had a sense of humour too.
I have been lucky enough to go to Japan and see the gardens, particularly in Kyoto, and they were staggering. It was a life-changing experience. And the overriding thing that impressed me was the incredible attention to detail. Talking of which, the attention to detail on these tomatoes is a bit lax, but interesting things are happening because, if you remember, I'm doing a little trial. The Gardener's Delight, and I planted some in a grow bag, some in plastic, quite large plastic pots, and some with very little compost in terracotta pots. And thank you, by the way, for all of you who've written to me, telling me and often showing me with pictures and ways that you grow your tomatoes. Now, as things stand, the ones in the grow bag are growing very strongly. The ones in the plastic pots are also growing strongly, whereas the terracotta pots were way behind. They're much smaller. But I'm not surprised at that. And anyway, the whole point is to test which produce the best fruit. So it's early days, but interesting. But now I'm going to plant my sweet corn. I sowed these a couple of months ago, potted them on, and you can see they've made nice, healthy plants. And they've grown hugely. They've trebled in size. They've got a nice root system, ready to plant out, particularly now the nights are getting warmer. That's the key. Warmer nights. Now, with sweet corn, I'm planting them out. There are just two things to remember. The first is to give them enough room. These are going to be big plants. They could be 6 foot tall. So if I put one here, put that in nice and firmly, the next one wants to be at least 2 foot away. And I'm not going to measure. I'll just work it out, do it by eye. But that's about right for me. So you do your first row in a line like that. Put that in, and then this one. But never plant sweet corns in rows. You must always plant it in a block. And I would say never plant less than 9, i.e. 3 by 3. I'll get 12 in here. And the reason for that is that sweet corn is wind pollinated. Now, the wind tends to come from over there. So if I had just that row, the wind would blow and take the pollen that way. Where there are no sweet corn waiting to be pollinated, I would have no cobs at all. So if you want to produce lovely golden sweet cobs, you must plant them in a block. I've got masses of room, and traditionally, particularly in South America, sweet corn was always grown along with beans and with squashes of some kind. So I've got a couple of courgettes I'll put in there, and then the rest of the space I'll fill up with lettuce. And by the time the sweet corn start to shade out the ground, I will have long harvested the lettuce, and the courgettes will be fine. This is going in here. Nothing like a shower to speed up the planting process. Right, I'm going to do the lettuce later. I'm getting too wet. Well, the rain can't dim the beauty of the roses. This is Madame Gregoire Steichlin. It's one of the first to bloom in this garden. And it's a good example, actually. If you get a decent framework on a climbing rose, you then get really good flowering shoots coming off these horizontal stems. And this is a repeat flower, so it will go on producing these great voluptuous blooms all summer long. Well, that's it for today's programme. I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next time. Bye-bye.